the Nativity from four different perspectives: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And you'll want to follow this because it's very interesting. In this particular program today, we're going to be looking at the perspective of the Gospel of Matthew and talking about how Matthew was one who wrote from the perspective of the Jewish lineage, and so you'll kind of want to look at that, and it will be helpful for you, I think. So welcome and Merry Christmas to you. We're bringing you these programs to kind of give you an idea of the concept of the Messiah, the concept of Jesus, the concept of salvation, and so on. This first one's from the Gospel of Matthew, as we've said, and Matthew kind of gets into this concept of the Messiah and the birth, but he really gets into some detail from the second chapter of Matthew. And if you're a New Testament buff, you probably know right where this is. If you've not studied the Bible much, it's the first chapter or second chapter of the first book of the New Testament, not the Old Testament. And so we want you to share with us on this particular day. Here at Christmas time, it's good for us to look at the reason for the season. Let me read to you first, and then we'll go back and do some commentary. But first, if you don't mind, just sit quiet, get your favorite beverage, sit down and enjoy. Second chapter of Matthew says, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all of his chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where this Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah? For out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had heard privily about these things, he called the wise men and inquired of them diligently, What time did that star appear? And then he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Now you go and you search out diligently for this young child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I might come and worship him also. When they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star, which they had seen before in the east, continued before them until it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw that star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened up their treasures, they presented unto him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed to their own country another way." So let's take a look, a little commentary now on this story and how it affects you, because these stories are ancient and the story of Christ is old. We know, over 2,000 years. And so what about this concept of Jesus and the birth of Christ? Well, Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. It's time stamped by Matthew, gives you the exact time when this happened. So you as a historian can go back, look up Herod, look up Judea, look up Bethlehem, and you'll know exactly when and where this occurred. There were some wise men. Now, it's interesting because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all talk about Jesus from separate perspectives. And that's what we're covering here in the series of 4. And here, Matthew, being a Jew, presents this concept of Christ to the Jewish mind so that they would have a complete foundation of the reasons they should accept this person born as a child here as their Messiah. They came from the east, and probably Syria or maybe Iran, or maybe Saudi Arabia somewhere. But they came from the east and they arrived in Israel. And they went to the city, capital city, and asked the king, where is this king of the Jews that we've been reading about in the prophets? And Herod, evidently not a very good Bible student at all, had no clue what they were talking about. Either he had put it out of his mind and hoped that it never happened, or he had not done his Bible work well enough to know that Jesus was going to be born, that the Messiah was going to be gone. So he sent the wise men away to rest or whatever for a little while, and then called all of his big shots in and said, where is this man supposed to be born? Where's this child? They quoted this prophecy from Genesis 49, recorded verse 10, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are you not the least among the princes of Judah? Aren't you the least significant? For out of you is going to come the governor of all of Israel, and he will rule the people. King of the Jews, coming out of Bethlehem of Judea, was completely out of their concept of possible, because a king would come from royalty and from Jerusalem somewhere, and having been born to a lineage of fine birth. But he's a different kind of king. And so these wise men wanted to know. Now Herod's ticked off, he's the king of the Jews, and he doesn't want another king, and so he's upset, but he doesn't know the address where Jesus was born or where they're staying. He doesn't know how to find him for sure. Then Herod, when he had privately called those wise men back into his chambers, where did you see the star and when? He's trying to get everything all sorted in his mind. Finally, he decided on a plan. He's going to send them to Bethlehem to find out about where their son is born. And he said, you go there and you find him and you bring me word again because, I want to worship him. Sure, Herod. Right. Now when they heard the king, they departed. It almost sounds, if you read between the lines, and we don't like to do that too often in the Bible, but they heard the king and they departed, and they said, he didn't seem sincere. And we're a little worried about this. But they went before them and they saw the star going before them, and they knew that they were on the way. And they were rejoicing when they saw that star, and it stood finally over the house where they had moved into. Probably what happened, these men saw the star when Jesus was born, same star that the angels might have seen in the heavens. And they followed it. And then they followed it to Bethlehem, and it shone down on the city, and it stopped over that vicinity. This miraculous star, star of wonder, star of night, star of royal beauty bright. And they went into the house and they knelt down before the baby. They didn't kneel down before Mary or before Joseph or any other king. They knelt down before this Messiah that they'd read so much about. Smart men, academics, teachers, people who knew something significant had happened. They opened the treasure, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and you can do your own research. Each of those gifts has a special significance to someone of royalty. And then they were warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, but they should go back to their own home countries after they had given their gifts and worshiped another way. Now, what's the takeaway from this story for us? Well, for the Jewish people, he's the Messiah, the prophecy's fulfilled. These wise men counted him, these well-respected academicians counted him as the Messiah. They'd done their research. They came to prove what they had read was true. They approved what was true, confirmed by giving the gifts. But what about you? What can you take out of this? First of all, remember that the kings and princes of this world may not be the religious leaders you need to be turning to. First lesson. Second, remember that those who are despised by others may be the ones who can bring you significant spiritual understanding and enlightenment. Jesus born in a manger around maybe cattle and sheep. We know there were a lot of sheep herders that came to see him. this Jesus was an unusual King of Kings, Lord of Lords, an unusual governor. Not born in pomp and circumstance, but in lowly nature, from a lowly tribe in a lonely place called Bethlehem. Notice that these three wise men, or there could have been more of them because maybe there were 4 or 5 and then they gave 3 gifts, which is significant. But there could have been 5 or 6 or several in the company, and they all worshiped him. And then they were warned by God to go back a different way. It was not yet time for Herod to find out where Jesus was and to kill him. And so, what about you? All of these people coming to Jesus faced different challenges and came to him through different ways. How did the wise men get here? Well, they went to Herod, who was not a religious person. You've already seen that. He was not a faithful person, and yet God used him to tell them where he was. Maybe somebody like that in your life is showing you, pointing you the way to Jesus, and you don't even see it yet. Somebody at work who's giving you a hard time. A family member who is dastardly and causing you much grief. All of these kinds of events and challenges in our life, cancer, diabetes, struggles with our health, all of these are not vexes, but way in which you can see more about your spiritual understanding of God and Jesus, his Son. What brought you to Jesus? It doesn't always have to be a preacher. It doesn't always have to be some religious experience. Sometimes it can be a lowly commoner, a friend. I remember a janitor in Wichita, Texas, who taught me great spiritual lessons while I was there holding revival. So there's lots of ways in which all the elements or different people in our lives can point us to Christ. They got here by a star. They got here by Herod. And the wise men and so on came because of the way God had worked all of this out. The prophets. So if you're not reading the Bible, then maybe it's a friend, a preacher, an uncle, an aunt, somebody, even somebody not a Christian could be giving you such a hard time that God's trying to lead you to Jesus. This is the story from Matthew. We'll have all 4 of them, and it's going to be interesting for you, I know. And we hope that you'll keep watching. But this is the Gospel of Matthew and the birth that occurred on this wise. I hope it brings you pleasure. Merry Christmas, and God bless you. And we'll see you in just a little while for our next chapter, 4 perspectives of the Nativity.